They didn't just steal money, they hollowed out nations, weaponized fear, and turned power into personal fortune. Mobutu Sese Seko, Zaire, 1965–1997. He stole an entire country's future while its people died surrounded by diamonds, gold, and oil. Mobutu Sese Seko did not hide his corruption. He normalized it. After taking power with Western backing during the Cold War, Mobutu transformed Zaire into a personal kingdom. Ministries existed only to funnel money upward. Soldiers went unpaid and survived by robbing civilians. Hospitals had no medicine. Roads collapsed into the jungle. Mobutu called it authenticide, but it was theft on an industrial scale. He demanded loyalty, not competence. If you stole and supported him, you stayed. If you questioned him, you vanished. State funds bought him private jets, European mansions, and leopard-skin thrones while citizens survived on less than $1 a day. By the 1990s, Zaire barely functioned as a country. When Mobutu fled, the state collapsed behind him, proof that corruption doesn't just rot leadership, it dissolves nations. Ferdinand Marcos, Philippines, 1965–1986. He ruled under martial law, silenced democracy, and stole billions while calling it patriotism. Ferdinand Marcos used fear as a financial strategy. When he declared martial law in 1972, he didn't just seize political power, he seized the economy. Opposition leaders were arrested. Media outlets were shut down. Businesses were handed to loyal friends and relatives. Foreign loans poured in. The money disappeared. Imelda Marcos became the global symbol of excess, jewelry, art, luxury real estate while ordinary Filipinos lined up for rice. Torture chambers operated quietly. Dissidents disappeared quietly. By the time the people revolted, the country was drowning in debt and trauma. Marcos fled with gold, cash, and documents, leaving a nation that would spend decades recovering from the damage. Sani Abacha, Nigeria, 1993–1998. He stole billions in oil money while ruling Nigeria through executions and terror. Abacha's rule was short, but devastating. Oil revenues flowed like blood through Nigeria, yet schools collapsed, hospitals failed, and electricity vanished. Political opponents were imprisoned or murdered. Activists like Ken Saro-Wiwa were executed to silence resistance. Abacha didn't just steal, he extracted. Money was moved through shell companies, foreign banks, and secret accounts. Even after his death, billions had to be traced and recovered across Europe. Nigeria survived, but trust in leadership did not. The Duvalier family, Haiti, 1957–1986. They ruled through death squads, superstition, and fear while looting the poorest nation in the Western Hemisphere. François Papa Doc Duvalier built power on terror. His private militia, the Tonton Macoute, killed without trial. Fear became daily life. When his son inherited power, corruption deepened. Foreign aid vanished. Infrastructure decayed. The state existed only to protect the family. When the Duvalier fled, Haiti was left with mass graves, shattered institutions, and generational trauma, scars still visible today. Suharto, Indonesia, 1967–1998. He presided over mass killings, stole billions through his family, and ruled Indonesia like a private corporation for over 3 decades. Suharto did not seize power in a single moment. He rose quietly, during fear, confusion, and bloodshed. In the mid-1960s, Indonesia was already unstable, divided by ideology, poverty, and Cold War pressure. When violence erupted, Suharto positioned himself as the man who could restore order. What followed was one of the largest political purges of the 20th century. Soldiers, militias, and civilian mobs killed suspected communists, intellectuals, teachers, and ordinary villagers. Many were never charged. Many were never named. Rivers filled with bodies. Once in power, Suharto built what economists later called a patrimonial state. Indonesia was not run by laws, it was run by loyalty. The military protected the system. Foreign investors paid into it. And Suharto's family sat at the center. His children controlled toll roads, banks, oil contracts, television stations, and monopolies on basic goods. If a company wanted access, it partnered with the Suharto family, or it didn't operate at all. To the outside world, Indonesia looked stable. Growth numbers were strong. But underneath, corruption hollowed everything out. Schools were underfunded. Infrastructure rotted. Rural communities stayed poor while elites grew untouchable. When the Asian financial crisis hit in 1997, the system collapsed almost overnight. The currency crashed. Food prices exploded. Students poured into the streets. The military hesitated. After 31 years, Suharto resigned quietly, not arrested, not tried, not punished. He died years later, wealthy, protected, and officially respected. Saddam Hussein, Iraq, 1979 to 2003. He ruled through terror, silence, and stolen oil wealth while an entire nation learned to fear its own walls. Saddam Hussein understood power as domination. From the moment he took office, he eliminated rivals, publicly. Ministers were dragged from meetings and executed. Loyalty was tested constantly. Fear became routine. Oil money flowed into the state, but it never belonged to the people. It funded weapons programs, intelligence networks, and massive palaces built across Iraq, many of them unused, built only to display control. Corruption under Saddam was not chaotic. It was controlled and weaponized. Smuggling networks flourished under sanctions, run by insiders. Food rations were distributed politically. Dissent meant starvation, or worse. Entire ethnic communities suffered. Kurdish villages were erased. Chemical weapons were used. Families disappeared into mass graves still being uncovered decades later. Even during international sanctions, while children died from preventable diseases, Saddam's inner circle remained insulated. The suffering was not accidental, it was tolerated. By the time the regime fell, Iraq was traumatized. Trust was broken. Institutions were empty shells. Saddam did not simply fall from power. He left behind a vacuum filled with grief, rage, and unresolved violence. Robert Mugabe, Zimbabwe, 1980 to 2017. He transformed a liberation movement into a personal empire, and a nation into a warning. Robert Mugabe entered power celebrated across Africa. He spoke the language of justice, unity, and self-determination. For a time, education improved. Healthcare expanded. Hope existed. But power hardened him. Opposition regions were targeted through military campaigns that killed thousands. Elections became rituals, not choices. Dissent was framed as betrayal. Land reform became the turning point. Farms were seized violently, often handed to political allies with no experience. Production collapsed. Food shortages followed. Corruption exploded quietly. State companies were looted. Currency manipulation destroyed savings. Inflation reached absurd levels. People were paid in money that lost value before they reached home. Yet Mugabe ruled on. Speeches grew longer. Reality grew thinner. When he was finally removed, it wasn't by voters, it was by his own party. He left behind empty factories, broken trust, and a generation raised on survival, not opportunity. The Kim dynasty, North Korea, 1948-present. They built a nation where corruption is invisible, because the state owns everything. The Kim dynasty did not simply rule North Korea. They engineered it. From birth, citizens are classified. Loyalty determines food, housing, education, even survival. Wealth flows upward, disguised as obedience. Corruption exists everywhere, but never openly. Bribes are survival tools. Smuggling feeds families. The state pretends not to see, until it wants to punish. Labor camps operate in silence. Families vanish. Entire bloodlines are erased for suspected disloyalty. Resources that could feed millions are spent on weapons, monuments, and luxury compounds hidden from satellite images. The system endures not because it works but because fear does. North Korea is not frozen in time. It is actively maintained. Corruption is not always loud. Sometimes it wears a uniform. Sometimes it speaks softly. Sometimes it calls itself stability. These leaders did not destroy their nations alone. They were enabled by silence, by fear, by the belief that things could not change. History shows us this clearly. When corruption lasts long enough, people stop imagining something better. And that may be its greatest crime. If you enjoyed this video, do well to like, share or subscribe for more videos on dark history.